Imagine discovering that at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean lie shipwrecks containing the Third Reich's greatest secret weapon, so powerful that the Allies did everything to erase its trace from history. And what you are about to discover will completely change everything you thought you knew about World War II. While the world watched the horrors of war on the surface, in the icy depths of the oceans, a silent arms race was taking place that could have changed the fate of all humanity. Hitler wasn't just building ordinary submarines. He was developing true technological monsters that defied everything that existed at the time. War machines that were decades ahead of their time and whose conception scientists and historians are still trying to understand today. The story begins in 1943 when German engineers received direct orders from Hitler to create something impossible. Submarines that could remain submerged indefinitely, were undetectable, and possessed unprecedented destructive power. The project was codenamed Top Secret, and only a handful of people worldwide knew of its existence. The underground shipyards in the Baltic Sea worked day and night, protected by layers upon layers of security, and anyone who tried to reveal what was being built there simply vanished without a trace. What made these submarines so special was not just their size or speed, but the revolutionary technology they carried inside. Propulsion systems that functioned without needing to surface, torpedoes guided by something that seemed like magic at the time, but which we now recognize as the first electronic guidance systems, and most disturbing of all, sealed compartments that carried something that classified documents referred to simply as special cargo. The Type 21 U-boats were just the tip of the iceberg. These submarines could travel at speeds that left Allied ships in the dust, dive to depths that made them virtually invisible to any detection technology of the time, and had a revolutionary battery recharging system that allowed them to remain submerged for weeks. But something even more sinister was being developed in parallel, projects that not all Nazi officers were authorized to know about. Soviet archives captured after the war contain reports of giant submarines found in German shipyards, vessels twice the size of any known U-boat, with hulls reinforced to withstand unimaginable pressures and internal compartments that made no sense to naval experts. Some of these compartments were lined with lead and had cooling systems suggesting that something radioactive was being transported inside. The question no one wants to answer is what exactly the Germans planned to do with this capability. There are testimonies from Allied sailors who, at the end of the war, sighted submarines with completely different shapes than usual, vessels that looked like giant discs or cigars, that surfaced and submerged at impossible speeds and disappeared from radar like ghosts. These accounts were all classified as confidential and locked in vaults for decades. And when they were finally released, they were so heavily censored that it is impossible to know what really happened. The most terrifying project of all was codenamed Project Marine Uranium. Documents discovered in 1985 reveal that German scientists were working on a way to use radioactive material in torpedoes, creating weapons that would not only sink ships but contaminate entire areas of the ocean for generations. Tests of these weapons supposedly took place in the deep waters of the North Atlantic, at coordinates that are still avoided by fishing vessels because navigation instruments malfunction when they approach that area. But the real conspiracy goes much further. As the war was ending, several of these advanced submarines simply disappeared. They weren't sunk, they weren't captured, they just vanished from the records as if they had never existed. There are theories that entire crews deserted and took these machines to secret ports in South America, Antarctica, or remote Pacific islands. In 1968, Argentine fishermen found metallic wreckage on a secluded Patagonian beach, wreckage with swastikas and serial numbers that corresponded to a U-boat that had officially been destroyed 3 years before the end of the war. The Allies knew exactly what they were up against and were terrified. There is a secret memorandum from the British High Command dated April 1945. where admirals discussed the real possibility that the Germans could launch devastating attacks even after the official surrender, using hidden submarines that would operate as terrorist cells in the oceans for years. The contingency plan included permanent monitoring of all major shipping lanes and orders to sink any unidentified submarine contact without asking questions. The technology found in German shipyards after the war was immediately confiscated and divided between the Americans and Soviets, initiating the submarine race of the Cold War. The first American and Russian nuclear submarines were basically improved copies of captured German designs. Nazi scientists were secretly recruited by both sides and continued their work, now under new flags but with the same objectives, to create submarine weapons capable of dominating the oceans. There is one particular submarine that haunts naval historians, U-boat number 977, which only surrendered in August 1945, months after the official end of the war, in an Argentinian port after a mysterious journey that lasted 66 days completely submerged. The commander of U-977 never revealed exactly what he was doing during all that time, where he was, or what he was transporting. Allied interrogations with the commander lasted weeks, and the records of these interviews remain classified to this day. Perhaps the most disturbing evidence comes from divers exploring U-boat wrecks in the Atlantic. They report finding sealed compartments that don't appear on any official diagrams, secret chambers with walls of unknown metal, and instruments they can't identify. A British diver disappeared in 2003 while exploring one of these wrecks and was never found. And after that incident, the German government declared several shipwreck sites as no-go zones punishable by imprisonment. What's truly frightening isn't just what Hitler managed to build, but how much of that technology is still out there, hidden, waiting to be discovered, or already being used by someone who doesn't want the world to know. There are strange patterns of underwater activity detected by modern ocean monitoring systems. Contacts that appear and disappear without explanation. Objects moving at depths and speeds that shouldn't be possible for any known technology. Now you understand why this story was buried for so long and why even today there are people who don't want the truth to come out. Because admitting what really happened in the oceans during World War II would mean admitting that we lost control of weapons capable of mass devastation, and that these weapons could be anywhere, in anyone's hands, waiting for the right moment to resurface from the depths. Declassified American intelligence records reveal something even more sinister. In March 1945, just weeks before the German surrender, Allied sensors detected an entire fleet of submarines leaving ports in Norway heading towards the South Atlantic. There were at least 15 vessels traveling in formation, something that contradicted all German naval doctrine at the time. Warships were sent to intercept this fleet, but when they arrived at the location they found absolutely nothing, as if the submarines had simply evaporated in the middle of the ocean. What is most disturbing is that 3 weeks after this detection, seismographs in various parts of the world recorded a massive underwater explosion in the South Atlantic with a magnitude equivalent to several tons of conventional explosives. The exact location was never publicly revealed, but leaked documents suggest it occurred near the Falkland Islands in an ocean trench more than 4,000 meters deep. Scientific expeditions attempted to investigate the area in the following decades, but all were mysteriously canceled or redirected at the last minute. Aerial photographs taken by Allied reconnaissance pilots in the final days of the war show strange underwater structures being built along the Norwegian coast. These were not simple docks or shipyards. They were entire underground complexes carved into the coastal mountains, with tunnels extending for kilometers into the rocks and channels leading directly to the deep sea. These facilities could house dozens of submarines simultaneously, completely invisible to reconnaissance aircraft or satellites, and some remain sealed to this day by order of the Norwegian government. A German engineer who worked on these projects and survived the war gave a secret interview in 1978. Shortly before his death, he revealed that the Nazis were developing a completely revolutionary propulsion system based on electromagnetic fields, something that at the time seemed like science fiction, but which we now know to be theoretically possible. These submarines would not use conventional propellers, but rather a magneto-hydrodynamic system that would push water using powerful magnetic fields, allowing unimaginable underwater speeds and virtually silent movement. The engineer also mentioned that there was an even more ambitious parallel project called Operation Valkyrie Submarine, which involved creating permanent bases on the ocean floor where submarines could be repaired, refueled, and even built without ever needing to surface. These bases would be built in deep ocean trenches, anchored to the seabed with modular structures that could be expanded over time. The idea was to create a secret network of underwater fortresses that would continue operating even after Germany's defeat on the surface. British intelligence reports from 1947 mention sightings of unidentified submarines off the coasts of Argentina, Chile, and even South Africa. Witnesses described gigantic vessels that emerged at night on deserted beaches, unloaded mysterious cargo, and disappeared before dawn. Naval patrols were sent to investigate but never managed to locate these vessels, as if they knew exactly when and where the patrols would be. Operation Paperclip, the secret American program that recruited Nazi scientists after the war, included a surprising number of naval engineers and submarine warfare specialists. These men were taken to isolated military bases in the United States and put to work on top-secret projects that remain classified to this day. One of them, whose name has never been publicly revealed, reportedly told American interrogators that the technology they developed for Hitler was at least 50 years ahead of anything the Allies or Soviets had, and that if the war had lasted 6 more months, the outcome could have been completely different. There is a particularly disturbing document in the Soviet Navy archives. In 1952, a Soviet submarine on patrol in the Arctic detected an underwater contact moving at an estimated speed of over 120 kilometers per hour, a speed impossible for any naval technology known at the time. The submarine attempted to pursue the contact but was easily left behind. The strangest thing is that the contact disappeared near the coast of Norway, precisely in the region where those German underground wartime facilities were located. Professional divers working in shipwreck salvage have their own stories to tell. One veteran with 40 years of experience revealed in an anonymous interview that he has found at least 3 U-boats in deep waters that are not listed in any official German loss records. These submarines were in pristine condition, as if they had been deliberately sunk after the war, and all had their serial numbers scraped off or removed. Even more unsettling, some of these wrecks had compartments that appeared to have been recently opened and emptied, with marks from modern tools on the hatches. Antarctica has always been the focus of more extreme theories about the ultimate fate of Nazi submarine technology. German expeditions visited the continent in the 1930s, mapping extensive coastal areas and allegedly discovering caves heated by underground volcanic activity where permanent bases could be established. After the war, both Americans and Soviets sent their own expeditions to Antarctica, officially for scientific research, but declassified documents suggest they were looking for something specific: German installations that might still be operational. In 1958, a Chilean fishing vessel accidentally caught in its nets a metallic object that appeared to be part of an advanced torpedo, with electronic components that experts at the time were unable to identify. The object was confiscated by American military personnel who were coincidentally in port that day, and the ship's captain was instructed never to mention the incident again. Photographs of the object were taken by a crew member and decades later shown to modern naval engineers, who confirmed that such technology should not have existed in the 1950s. the most secret project of all was codenamed Glock or Bell, and although most information about it relates to land-based experiments, there is evidence that a maritime version was being developed. It involved some kind of device that generated anti-gravity or energy fields, allowing submarines to move in ways that defied the laws of conventional physics. Partially burned diagrams found in German bunkers show schematics of something that looks like a submarine but with a completely different shape, more like a disc or sphere. Fishermen in various parts of the world report strange phenomena they experience when over deep waters in certain regions of the Atlantic. Electronic instruments that stop working for no reason, compasses that spin uncontrollably, and in some cases, sightings of strange lights beneath the surface of the water, lights that move in intelligent patterns and disappear when observed for too long. Marine scientists dismiss these reports as legends or poorly understood natural phenomena, but the patterns of sightings correspond exactly to the routes that German U-boats used during the war. In 2009, a documentary expedition discovered something extraordinary while filming shipwrecks in the Baltic Sea. Sonar images showed a perfectly symmetrical circular structure on the ocean floor, approximately 60 meters in diameter, far too large to be a conventional submarine but clearly built by human hands. When they tried to return to the site for further investigation, they discovered that the exact coordinates had been declared a restricted military zone by the Swedish government, and any approach would be interpreted as a violation of national security. The truth is, the deeper you investigate, the more questions arise and the fewer answers you find. There are layers upon layers of secrecy, documents that have been destroyed, witnesses who have vanished, evidence that has mysteriously disappeared. And the most frightening thing of all is realizing that this secrecy didn't end in 1945. It continues to this day, meaning that whatever the Nazis built at the bottom of the oceans is still considered dangerous enough to be kept in absolute secrecy 80 years later. Declassified CIA files from 2017 reveal something few expected to find. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the agency maintained a secret operation called Project Blue Abyss, dedicated exclusively to tracking and recovering Nazi underwater technology still hidden in the oceans. The project's budget was astronomical for the time, equivalent to hundreds of millions of dollars today, and involved dozens of research vessels disguised as civilian or scientific ships. Most disturbingly, the project was never officially terminated. Only its name was changed and its operations transferred to an even deeper level of classification. A former U.S. Navy officer who worked on this project in the 1960s broke his oath of secrecy in 2015, shortly before dying of cancer. He revealed that the true mission was not just to find lost submarines, but to locate specific cargoes that had allegedly been hidden on the ocean floor by the Germans in the final days of the war. These cargoes included not only stolen gold and treasure, but also weapons prototypes, technical documents, and according to him, something they called special biological material, the exact meaning of which he was never authorized to learn. There is an incident that occurred in 1968 and remains shrouded in mystery to this day. The Soviet submarine K-129 sank in circumstances never fully explained in the North Pacific. The CIA launched a top-secret rescue operation called Project Azorian using the ship Hughes Glomar Explorer officially to recover Soviet codes and equipment. But documents leaked years later suggest that the real objective was to recover something the K-129 had found before sinking. Something the Soviets had discovered first, but which the Americans couldn't allow to fall into Russian hands. Experts who analyzed the K-129's movements before its disappearance noted that the submarine was investigating specific coordinates where, according to captured German records, a convoy of U-boats had disappeared in 1945. Crews of modern nuclear submarines, both American and Russian, report strange experiences when navigating certain areas of the Atlantic. Their sonars detect phantom echoes, contacts that appear and disappear without logical pattern, and in some cases, structures on the seabed that shouldn't be there according to all known geological maps. These reports are officially attributed to thermal anomalies or unusual geological formations. But veteran submariners confide that there is something else happening down there, something their orders tell them to ignore and never mention in official reports. A Brazilian oceanographer made an intriguing discovery in 2003 while mapping the seabed of the South Atlantic off the coast of Rio Grande do Sul. His instruments detected a massive magnetic anomaly in a deep water area, a concentration of metal that did not correspond to any known natural formation. When he tried to organize an expedition to investigate more closely, his funding was mysteriously cut and he was pressured by authorities to abandon that line of research. 2 years later, American military ships were seen conducting operations in the same area, and since then the region has been declared a permanent naval exercise zone close to any kind of civilian exploration. The Nazis had a program called Operation Sea Eagle that few historians know about. Its objective was to create submarines capable of carrying small aircraft that could be launched from the ocean surface to carry out surprise attacks against coastal targets and then land again near the submarine to be recovered. Prototypes of these aircraft carrier submarines were built and, according to some accounts, successfully tested in the Baltic Sea. After the war, both Americans and Soviets developed their own missile submarines. But some experts argue that the original idea and much of the technology came directly from these captured German designs. In 1974, an American spy satellite captured unusual infrared images in the Indian Ocean near the coast of Namibia. The images showed a thermal signature consistent with a large submerged metallic structure generating heat, as if some kind of reactor or engine were operating in the depths. Reconnaissance planes were sent but found nothing on the surface. American and British submarines were discreetly sent to investigate, and although the details of this operation remain classified, it is known that they found something because immediately after the mission, the United States Navy established a 50 nautical mile exclusion zone around that area, a zone that exists to this day without official explanation. There are fascinating accounts of encounters between modern submarines and unidentified underwater objects, so-called USOs. Nuclear submarine commanders describe objects that move at speeds that no known technology could achieve underwater. Objects that change direction instantaneously, defying the laws of inertia, and that seem to demonstrate knowledge of the maneuvers of the submarines pursuing them. While many dismiss this as natural phenomena or sonar effects, some military analysts suggest a more disturbing explanation, that this could be German technology that has evolved over the last 8 decades, kept operational by someone or something that still uses the secret bases built during the war. An extraordinary document surfaced at a military memorabilia auction in 2011. It was a personal diary of a Kriegsmarine officer serving at one of the secret shipyards in Norway. The final entries, written in April 1945, described the frantic evacuation of the shipyard and the loading of multiple submarines with cargo that the officer describes only as equipment vital to the survival of the Reich. He mentions that the submarines would depart in different directions, each carrying part of a larger plan that would allow for the resurgence of Germany in the future. The officer also writes about specific coordinates where rendezvous points were established, coordinates that, when verified, correspond to remote oceanic areas where unexplained sightings still occur today. The underwater camouflage technology the Germans developed was decades ahead of anything that existed. They created special coatings for submarine hulls that absorbed sonar waves, making the vessels virtually invisible to acoustic detection. Scientists who studied samples of these materials after the war were perplexed by their composition, which included elements and alloys that should not have been possible to produce with the metallurgy of the time. Some of these materials had properties that modern science still struggles to replicate. suggesting that the Germans had access to knowledge or resources that official history has never acknowledged. Deep-sea fishermen along the coast of Argentine Patagonia have a local legend about what they call the Iron Ghost, a giant submarine that supposedly appears on stormy nights, always in the same area, always moving in the same direction. Dozens of witnesses over decades describe the same thing: a dark, massive structure that emerges briefly before submerging again, leaving only strange waves and the low-frequency hum that can be felt in the bones. Argentine naval authorities have investigated the report several times, but always officially conclude that they are just rock formations or whales, conclusions that local fishermen ridicule based on their decades of experience in those waters. The American space program has an unexpected connection to Nazi submarine technology. Werner von Braun and other German scientists who went to the United States not only worked on rockets, but also consulted on secret naval projects. Von Braun reportedly said in a private meeting that some of the concepts they used for rocket propulsion came from parallel work being developed for submarine propulsion in Germany, systems that use similar principles of thrust generation in high-pressure environments. This raises the disturbing question of how many other technologies we attribute to the space age actually have their roots in these secret projects from the ocean floor. In 2019, a seafloor mapping expedition funded by a European university discovered something unsettling in the mid-Atlantic ridge. High-resolution sonar images showed what appeared to be an artificial entrance in the volcanic rock, a tunnel large enough for a submarine to pass through, leading into the underwater mountain formation. The team wanted to investigate further, but their ship was approached by a NATO frigate that informed them they were in a restricted military area and should leave immediately. No military zone had been declared in that region before that day, and when the team tried to inquire or obtain more information, they were simply escorted out of the area without further explanation. Perhaps the most unsettling truth about all this is not what the Nazis built or where they hid it, but rather the fact that 80 years later, there are still areas of the oceans that are monitored, documents that remain sealed, and questions that no one in a position of authority is willing to answer. When governments of different countries, who were enemies in the war, agree to keep the same secrets for so many decades, you have to ask yourself what exactly they are protecting or from whom they are protecting us. The oceans cover more than 70% of our planet, and we know less about their depths than we do about the surface of Mars. In this unexplored vastness, in trenches that have never been fully mapped, in underwater caves that no human has ever visited, how many stories are still waiting to be discovered, and how many others are being carefully planned to remain undiscovered? The next time you hear about an inexplicably restricted maritime zone, a scientific expedition canceled for no apparent reason, or military equipment being sent to investigate oceanic anomalies, remember that not everything that sinks into the sea remains just a memory of the past. Some secrets have the ability to remain alive in the depths, silent and invisible until the moment they decide to resurface. Meanwhile, somewhere in the dark, icy waters of the Atlantic, the Pacific, or perhaps much closer than we imagine, rusty wreckage silently guards its stories, patiently waiting for someone to ask the right questions, or perhaps hoping that no one ever will.